Welcome back. You're watching India Sense with me, Gaurie Dwivedi. On to the Top Voice segment of the show, where I speak with global opinion makers and leaders. This week, we have Mark Mobius, legendary investor who understands emerging markets like none other. Mr. Mobius, thanks much for speaking to NDTV. My first question to you, sir, is that there's been a historic mandate that Prime Minister Modi has come back with. The markets have given a thumbs up to the verdict. How do you see and what lies ahead as far as Prime Minister Modi's roadmap and agenda is concerned?
Well, of course, we were all very excited to see him come back because he's done so much for the Indian economy. Of course, he did not get the expected amount of seats to change the constitution, but that's fine. I mean, it showed that Indian democracy is working, and I think that's a good thing. And I think it's also good that he has to make amends and make agreements with the opposition, which I think is healthy for the country. So I think everything is going very well. I think India will continue to go from strength to strength.
Indeed. And in Modi 3.0, Mr. Mobius, the focus is largely expected to be on growth and development. But I have to ask you this. You've been tracking emerging markets for almost 6 decades now. What do you think is India's secret sauce towards becoming a superpower? What could that be?
Well, the first, most important key source is the Indian people. You have a young population, average age, about 26, 27. It's a huge population, over 1 billion, the largest now in the world, and an incredible number of people speaking international language, English, which can absorb a lot more technology and do more globally than perhaps any other country in the world. And then you have this incredible variety of outlooks and cultures with the different states, which I think is a big, big strength for India, because you have the different viewpoints, different ways of looking at things, and that is very important. And then, of course, out of this has grown the interest in technology, which Modi is promoting, the digitization of the economy, which is accelerating growth in the country. So all of these things put together make for an interesting and very optimistic outlook for the country.
Technology definitely is important, but before that, I want to ask you about infrastructure, because that's been the hallmark in the first 2 terms. In the last 10 years, we've seen major infrastructure push. Do you expect that to continue?
Of course, infrastructure is one of the drawbacks and one of the problems that India faces, because the movement of people from the rural areas to the urban areas, and the general, how could I say, the enthusiasm of the young population is moving ahead of the infrastructure. So the country has to move very quickly to move the infrastructure forward and improve infrastructure. And that includes roads, it includes railroads, it includes power. I mean, India needs more and more power and power distribution. So all of these things must be accelerated. And I'm happy to see that a lot is being done in that direction, but more needs to be done. It's quite a big task.
All right. Now, the other aspect as far as the Indian economic scenario is, how does China do? Right now, the Chinese economy is slowing down. And I want to ask you this, sir, that how important or how crucial do you think this is for the Indian economy? Which are the sectors you feel that investors would dump China for India?
Well, if you look at China, obviously the economy has grown to such a size that it's very difficult for China to grow at 10% or 7% like it did in the past. Simply, it's too big. It's the same with the U.S. The U.S. is such a huge economy. It's very difficult to have a growth of more than 3 or 4% a year. So that's one thing. The other thing that's happened is that Chinese workers have increased their incomes pretty dramatically over the last 10 years. So per capita wages have moved up. Now, of course, they're below a lot of other countries in the world, but still they've moved up. And there's a need for them to move a lot of their manufacturing outside of China, which is why India has an opportunity. So one of the things that I think India has to do is welcome Chinese investment. And I know there may be some political concerns about that, but generally, India can do a lot that China has been doing in the past because the wages in India are so much lower. And of course, the skills of Indian workers are just as good as Chinese workers, if not better. So there's an incredible opportunity there. And of course, the other opportunity is the fact that the Americans and Europeans would like to diversify their supply chains. And one way to do that is to do more in India, to get more supplies from India. And that will alleviate the supply chain crisis they have been facing with too much reliance on China.
In your opinion, Mr. Mobius, which are the 3 key reforms that you would want Modi 3.0 to undertake?
I think one of the key measures, many of course, but one of the key measures would be to free up the inflows of investments. In other words, make it easier for investors to come into the country. That means freeing up the exchange rate systems, the flows of funds in and out of the country, and make it easier for foreign countries and foreign companies to register their enterprises in India. I think it's very, very important because that will accelerate the inflow of investments.
You mentioned technology earlier in the interview. I want to ask you this. What do you think will be the next phase of tech growth in India? We've had UPI, which has been the backbone of our financial payment system. What's the future like for our tech landscape?
Well, the most interesting thing about India is that they already are a leader in software. You travel around the world and you'll see Indian software companies doing work for companies in Latin America, in the Americas, in Europe, and so forth and so on. So this is an incredible accomplishment. And by the way, one of the reasons for that is, of course, the ability of the Indian entrepreneurs to speak English and to operate in different parts of the world. So that's a terrific accomplishment. But now the next phase has to be the semiconductors and hardware. In other words, electronics hardware is where India will excel in the future, simply because you've got the population, you've got the workers, and you've got the know-how. There's no reason why you can't do the same thing that's happening in China and Taiwan and other parts of the world, and maybe even better. It's interesting. One of my friends said, "Oh, the Indians don't have the skill of the Chinese in making semiconductors." And I said, "Have you ever seen where all of the diamonds in the world are polished and how small those diamonds are and how skilled those workers are? There's no reason why they can't do the same thing with semiconductors." So there's a great opportunity there, and I think India will grow dramatically in that direction.
Mr. Mobius, thanks much for speaking to NDTV.